Hello, and welcome to episode 47 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp, and with me, as always, are Michael Ronn and Jamie Maltman. How you guys doing?
Great, Patrick. How are you this week?
Good. And tonight we have a guest, Amy Miller. How are you?
Just fine. How are you guys?
Excellent. Thanks for coming.
Another local Iowa author.
And
two
so tonight,
Iowans and two Canadians tonight.
What's that?
I said 2 Iowans and 2 Canadians tonight.
Oh, there you go. So tonight we're going to be talking about genre hybrids or genre mashups. And before we get to that, and before we do our roundtable, we'll ask Amy if she'd like to tell us a little bit about, what kind of stuff do you sort of read in general?
I read a lot of different things. My go-to is usually fantasy with a touch of sci-fi. But when you're researching and doing other things, there's an awful lot of nonfiction that I read.
So, like craft, or do you mean specifically like
Research.
Research.
Research, yes. Research.
Okay. So we'll do a little bit of a roundtable here on what we've been reading for the last week, and I think we had usually I go left to right, but I think we're probably going to let Jamie go first this week because he wasn't here last week and has probably got a bit of a list to go through.
It's funny, not as much as I might have thought that I would, because I've just finished longer books rather than a whole ton of books like I had been for a while. But yeah, I missed everyone last week because I was watching my poor Raptors lose live in Game 2, and now they're done, so I don't need to talk about that anymore. But I finished, the one I did finish in time for what would have been last week's show was the Sekhmet Bed, which is #1 in the She-King series, which is by our friend of the show who was on a few weeks ago, Libby Hawker. And I think the new cover she's got, it shows up as by Libby Hawker, whereas the old one showed up as her pen name, LM, or even the older version, Lavender Ironside, I think. And that was really cool. It was so very well done historical fiction, very vividly historical story about a daughter of a pharaoh in ancient Egypt, and when the pharaoh dies, then it means that she would normally be marrying her brother that would be the next pharaoh, but she doesn't have any brothers, so it's a matter of the succession, and then what's going to happen with that, and then she has an older sister, and it's about who gets to be the royal wife versus like the second wife, and then so it's really about sort of the court intrigue and all the different aspects of how that would have impacted her life and her relationship with her mom and her grandmother, and so it's very much more of a relationship-y type book. But just so vividly historical and just really neat, and she has like dreams related to the gods there a bit too, and so I really enjoyed it, and I'm interested to read more of the series, and so I thought that was really well done indie historical fiction, and I think that was Libby's first book that she published too, so it's really well done. So then the other one, that, ironically, that I started reading just after that was the same book that P.T. Hilton brought up last week, which is The Three Body Problem. #1 in the Three Body series, apparently, by Liu Cixin, famous. Like I guess it's apparently one of the best-selling science fiction novels ever in China, and was just translated into English by Ken Liu last year. And I'd actually heard them talking about it as one of their, I think it was either the book of the week or just something that they referenced on Writing Excuses podcast, and so I just checked it out at the library, and I've been reading it, and like PT said last week, it is very it is very hard sci-fi in terms of the physics side of things. But it's also got a neat historical aspect, which I find interesting, having half of my degrees in Asian studies, specifically China. So it actually starts with a pretty vivid scene in the Cultural Revolution, where they're berating, like in one of the struggle sessions against one of the academics, like against a physicist, and just it really portrays just how horrible that whole period was, especially if you were some kind of academic or capitalist or factory owner or whatever, for many years there in China. And so it goes through it's got them, and then it's got how that impacted the daughter of this academic and the wife a little bit there, and then it comes forward into the sort of present day, and it has some sort of thrillerish aspects. And then it's got, like he was saying, this video game aspect where it's talking about this classical 3 celestial body problem and how they gravitationally interact, and how basically how a world would look if it had 3 suns that were connected to it. and there's alien aspects to it as well. It's been an interesting book, and it's not like the physics is inaccessible. It's just that there is quite a lot of physics in fairly different areas as well. I don't love it, but I am overall enjoying it. So it's definitely very interesting. And the fact that it's set in China, it has all these cultural things. That part is particularly cool to me. I'm almost done. I think I'll probably finish that tonight. And I've also been reading more of my dinner table reading is The History of the Book in 100 Books, The Complete Story from Egypt to eBook, which actually dovetails nicely with those 2 books I mentioned, doesn't it? By Roderick Cave. And I think I'm up to about like medieval times, but pre-Gutenberg. And it's really neat because it chooses these 100 books. It's not necessarily the most important, in terms of the top 100 novels or something like that. It's typifying different types of what we would consider books, like some of the palm leaf ones that they'd have in parts of Southeast Asia and India and that sort of thing, or just different materials that they used at different times and different ways of like quipus or whatever they call them from the Incas, like where they beaded the knots and thread and stuff. So just really neat stuff. I'm curious to see how it goes because it's very much into more of the archaeological and then sort of ancient historical stuff so far. But as it gets more into closer to modern day, I think it'd be quite interesting. And that's like a massive coffee table type volume. But and it's neat because it's got all these almost like hyperlinks at the bottom corner of the page where it's like if you want to know more about maps of different things, then you go to this page or this page or this page, so you can sort of follow interests as well as just sort of going chronologically. So I think that's pretty much my 2 weeks in reading.
Okay. So that's almost less than you would normally bring to the table in 1 week.
I know.
So, Amy, would you like to go next?
Sure. The most recent thing that I've read was Within by Aaron Bunce, who is another Iowa author. I've been doing a lot of reading from authors that I've met in the area. It is an epic fantasy. It is a huge book. Several viewpoints. It's just one of those that, think George R.R. Martin. You've got that much going on.
Okay.
You follow, I think it's 4 different characters throughout the book. You've got monsters that are just incredible. The kid's got an imagination like nobody's business.
So when you say kid, do you really mean kid?
Well, no, but to me he's a kid because he's about half his age.
Okay. That's not like the guy who wrote Aragon, or he's not 15 or 16. Was it 17, I think?
No,
15, I think, when he started. Christopher Pauline.
Okay. And that's the kind of, sounds like you're reading a brick, so that's sort of focusing on one thing right now.
Yeah, that and other things that some of them I can't really talk about because they're beta reads, so.
So do you normally read sort of one thing at a time, or do you have like 8 or 9 books going on all at once?
Usually 8 or 9 things going on.
I think that's probably like the rest of us too.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, 8 or 9 things for me that I have been reading. But yeah, this is one of those weeks where I started a ton of stuff, but I just could not commit to anything. So I had a lot of writing books that I was reading, but then I just couldn't get motivated to finish them. So I really haven't picked up Libby Hawker's book. I'm still only about 25% of the way through it, but hopefully I'll have it read by next week. But
which
I've been
one?
reading
Take Your Pants Off? Or?
Yeah, Take Off Your Pants. Yeah. You can't not say that title without smiling, right?
I know.
Yeah. So yeah, but what I've read so far, I've loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I reread Dean Wesley Smith's Riding into the Dark, a few chapters in and out of that. I just finished up a book on formatting, so I've been reading a lot about paperbacks, like how they're actually, like what the different elements are of them, and really dry stuff about like how to format them and specifications and things like that. I'm in one of those modes where I'm just reading like pure technical stuff, so nothing really that's worth mentioning. Some books on metadata, but the only thing I've been listening to an audiobook though. One of my favorite books, Elmer Gantry by Sinclair Lewis. Maybe you guys have read that or not, but
No.
It was written at the turn of the 20th century, and it's about the rise and fall of a guy who's basically a con artist and swindler at heart who becomes a preacher. in like 1904, and gets his congregation together and is basically just up to no good. And so it's about his antics and his rise and fall. And it was a really good book. I've read it about 3 times, and it was so controversial when it was written that I think they said in the back of the book that somewhere in Virginia that they invited Sinclair Lewis to his own hanging. So, like they had a rope and everything ready for him because it was so critical of preachers and pastors at the time. It was really kind of attacking religion and attacking hypocrisy. So, it's really cool. Elmer Gantry's he's one of those anti-heroes that you just love. Like he just crushes people and just does these awful things to people, and at the same time you're rooting for him because you just want to see how bad it gets. So I've been listening to the audiobook by Anthony Held, and it's a really good narration. He's kind of got like a southern drawl, and he really brings it to life because it takes place in Missouri in the early 1900s. So yeah, I've been listening to that and really been enjoying that a lot. So that's pretty much been my week.
Elmer Gantry rings a bell for me for some reason, but if somebody, I know I've heard the name before, but
Yeah,
I would have thought that he was an author or. Has the story ever been made into a movie?
Yeah,
or?
it's a pretty famous movie.
Okay.
I can't remember Burt something, the author. Not I think Burt Reynolds, but Burt something. Yeah.
Lancaster?
Yeah, Burt Lancaster. Yeah, it was like in the 1920s. The movie's actually more famous than the book.
Maybe that's why I recognize the name.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you like literary fiction, he's a really good author. He's got really good flowery language. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Ray Bradbury. Very satirical. Definitely recommend it.
Okay, that's it for your week.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, I've been having a couple weeks myself where I've been feeling like I've been sort of reading a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and not really finishing very much. But I did read the Dean Wesley Smith's Writing into the Dark posts that you guys had mentioned last week, and that isn't a book yet, but it hopefully will be soon. I don't know if does he pull those things down off of his blog? Prior.
With a lot of these, what he does is right now he's taking a lot of his old lectures or just stuff that he's given talks on in the past, writes a series of blog posts about them and puts them up one a day, and then as soon as he gets it bound with his publishing company into a book, then he pulls it down. So it should be, I think it's like in the next week or two, it's going to be made into a book. So
it's a pretty quick read. It's 9 posts in 10 chapters, I think. So I blew through that in a couple of hours, and I really enjoyed it a lot. There's some techniques there that I think I want to try, and I'm definitely going to buy the book when it comes out because there might be a few extra little things in there that he tacks on at the beginning or the end. And I read She Sat, He Stood. What Do Your Characters Do While They Talk by Ginger Hansen. Have you guys read that one?
No, I saw it on your Goodreads feed, but
I've heard it.
Sounded interesting.
I think I picked it up because I had heard it a few times in the our circles that we hang in, but I honestly didn't really get very much out of this one. So I mean, you can tell from the title, it's about making your dialogue not just dialogue, but part of a setting, and what do they do while they're not just standing stationary in a room talking, they're doing things, whether it's body movement, the way they're sitting, the way they're acting, or actually interacting with things in the room. And so I think there's the beginnings of a good book here. She spends a lot of time kind of prefacing everything by talking about relating it to, say, like a stage play. Like, you need to build your set, and then you've got the props, and you need to be aware of what props you have in your set, and she goes into great detail about body movement and all those kinds of things. And she uses, I think the issue that I had with it is she uses one example from one of her books to kind of bring it all together, and none of them are what you would expect from the cover, which is 2 people in a room with a lot of different things to kind of play with and interact with. It's a scene that's set kind of outside, historical fiction, and reading that actually pushed me back to picking up a book that I started a while ago, which was James Scott Bell's new book on dialogue, How to Write Dazzling Dialogue, The Fastest Way to Improve Any Manuscript. And I went back to that, and as typical of his books, I'm not too far into it, but right away, I mean, he's using examples out of screenplays and pulling from a lot of different sources, and I think that serves a book like that a lot better. Not just kind of focusing on one example in one genre. You got to kind of show us things from, pull some stuff out of great books, and give us more examples of what you're talking about. So like I said, I think there's the seeds of a good book there, but I think it needs to be broader and use a lot more examples.
I was going to ask, does she go to the other end of, talking about how much is too much? Because I've seen, lots of that too in certain things. And like, I know sometimes when I'm writing a first draft, I'll put in a lot of extra sort of stage direction-y stuff just so that I've got it myself, but then I'll find myself taking some of it out because I'll be like, it's disruptive and too much.
Yeah, she deals with the balance.
Okay, good.
For sure. And like anything, I mean, I mean, you read some of the, Rat on Fire and The Friends of Eddie Coyle and books like that by Higgins, and I mean, his books are like 80 or 85% dialogue, if not more, and they're amazing. So there's, it's like I said, I would like to see her kind of add to this, because I think there's definitely the seeds of a good book there, but it needs more. So yeah, I started reading the James Scott Bell again, and then I finally finished yours, Isaac Asimov, A Lifetime of Letters, which is attributed to him as being the author, because I mean he did write most of the letters, but it was actually his brother that put this book together after he passed away, and I enjoyed it a lot. There were a couple sections that I kind of skimmed over, some areas of his life that just just didn't interest me that much, or whatever, the letters, but most of it was really interesting. He was a really interesting guy. He was glued to that typewriter like 20 hours a day, every day. Hated to travel. Would turn down speaking engagements because he was didn't want to fly, didn't want to go on the water, and I mean he was just a workhorse, right? I mean, but he wrote. I think the last count I can remember is like it's under 500, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. He might just be the most prolific. I think I would be curious to see who the most prolific author of all time is. I think he probably
he's up there.
No, he's actually not even close.
Really?
But yeah, there's some authors out there. I wish I could remember the name. There's a guy in South America, I think, who like writes a book a day, and they're quick fire. I think Western, kind of dime things you would think of them as dime novels from years ago. And I think Hugh Howey wrote a blog post about him a while ago.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah,
so if you wanted to go back and find who I'm talking about, we could probably look back through Hugh Howey's blog. But so I think Asimov was probably definitely the most prolific, or one of the top most prolific North American traditionally published guys that we've read. But yeah, there's some dudes throughout the world that are just banging stuff out a lot faster.
Let's do a quick search, and yeah.
Yeah, if you do a Google search,
that's that
most prolific author of all
something
time.
like that.
He's if you do a Google search,
Corín Telado or something like that, Spanish.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
4,000 novellas.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, Asimov is definitely on the list, but he's certainly not at the top.
Yeah.
And that was my reading for the week. Other than all of the other little things that I touched here and there but haven't finished, so. We can move on to our topic and talk about genre hybrids. And anybody have any initial thoughts on that? Do we read genre hybrids? I can only think of one off the top of my head that I've read over the past few years. Anybody else? Read them all the time. Have you guys been reading Anna Karenina plus Zombies, or any of those books that have... There's a lot of those on the market right now, eh?
Yeah, that's blowing up. It's like Pride and Prejudice with zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amy, did you just roll your eyes?
I think you guys probably read more of them than you realize in subtle ways.
Yeah.
Okay. That's probably fair. The one that I and I've mentioned this one before is because it really stood out to me as a genre mashup, was The Automatic Detective by A. Lee Martinez. And that's one where, the main character is a robot that was basically built to be able to destroy the world, and he's kind of lost his memory, and he's a detective. Some people that he cares for get kidnapped, and he goes off and tries to solve the mystery. And it's a noir science fiction. Dashiell Hammett meets, I don't know, science fiction. And I absolutely loved that book. It's he can be hit or miss sometimes, and that book just I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you mentioned that a couple of times. I need to add that to my list.
Yeah, that's one. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think a lot of the genre of mashups that I've read have been kind of subtle. Like I guess when I first started really reading literary fiction, like a lot of that, it seems like, is kind of a mashup. Kind of like the stuff by Edgar Carrot. He's a Israeli short story author that I probably mentioned more than once on the show, but he writes a lot of, like in one book of short stories, he writes a lot of different types of narratives. Like you'll see some stuff with a murder in it, and in the next story you'll see pure comedy and satire. He just kind of jumps all over the place. That's one I can think of.
But those are in different stories, right? Not
different stories, but he has different genre elements within one story.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon to see different. You really never know what you're going to see with him. Like one moment it's like bunnies. Well, I'm exaggerating, but one moment it's like bunnies, and the next moment they're all dying. You never know what he's going to do. So I would call him a mashup author. But.
That's awesome.
Of course, if we're going to talk mashups, I have to at least mention again Serenity, Firefly. You thought I was going to say The Martian, but no.
I thought you were going to say Funicula. Oh, what is it?
Was it the Hollow Chocolate Bunnies of the Apocalypse? No.
Yeah.
No, Serenity. I mean, that was definitely a mashup with the space western, and that was also a cultural mashup where he specifically created a world where what China and America had kind of merged into one culture, and everybody speaks Chinese. That's in fact, or at least they curse in Mandarin, I think. But that's a hardcore mashup, and it's wonderful.
Yes, it is.
What about you, Amy?
Well, not to bring up Iowa authors again, since Michael and I are so fond of them, but Tamara Siler-Jones, her Dubrick Byerly mysteries, it's a quasi-medieval. She claims that it's an apocalyptic setting, so they've been shoved basically back to a medieval setting. But it's a police procedural, a mystery, and fantasy. It's just all of these things, and that's what got me thinking about this topic when Michael was talking to me, was I remembered those, and I was going to pick them up and read them again, because they are so different. Another one, I don't know if you guys have read any Chelsea Quinn Yarborough.
No.
That would be closer to literary historical with vampires. Her main character is Count Saint Germain, and she's turned him into a vampire, and you get to go through the different time periods, which I'm sure Jamie would like, with the Roman settings in a couple of them.
Cool.
I could see, that's the kind of genre mashup I would like, where, kind of like what you're saying, like, say, in one of Jamie's books, if he's writing about something happening in Rome, but it's not, it could be a police procedural set in Rome with, where they're trying to solve a mystery, and it just happens to be set in that time. Yeah, that's a little more subtle and I think interesting than, I was looking at I think a lot of this started with Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Was looking at a list of, mashups, and Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters is one.
Android Karenina. That's my favorite.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. What's, actually, Michael, you had read one that I guess would be a mashup, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It starts with a C. The cover it's Cinderella, basically, in space.
Oh, Cinder.
That's
Marissa Meyer. Yeah, that would be.
I heard them mention that on Writing Excuses, I think, this week.
Yeah, I guess you could call that a mashup. It's like I I
space
guess
fairy tale, right?
have you read it, Amy?
No, I haven't, but it's on my
Okay.
list.
It's like a young adult romance, but it's the heroine is like an android. So yeah, I guess that would be a good one. I didn't think about that
I
one.
wonder though if that would be a mashup or more just a
Subgenre.
retelling, or like a retelling of a story in a different setting. So is it
But that's still a
I think
it's
that's
still a
that.
mashup.
I
It's
would
a
still
fairy
think that would be a
tale
mashup.
sci-fi, right? Like,
fairy tale sci-fi? Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mash them up.
Gosh, I just had one on the tip of my tongue. I just forgot,
Fun.
just like that.
I was going to say our friends of the
Oh.
show. I can't believe they haven't been mentioned yet, but our buddies at Sterling and Stone,
Mm-hmm.
Johnny B.
Yeah.
True and Sean Platt,
Yeah.
started with Unicorn Western, which is
That's one of the greatest mashups of all time. I
fantasy,
think.
right? It's like
Yeah.
epic fantasy slash gunslinger slash all
Western.
sorts of slash
Yeah.
silly and
Pretty cool.
right. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. His pretty much anything that they did together to start with was that way. Like the for Fiction on Box last year, Dream Engine.
Yeah.
Was
Robot Proletariat.
more
Yeah.
fantasy, like it's somewhat fantasy. It was like fantasy steampunk YA stuff, but
Well, that's
it was
kinda-
more fantasy than a typical steampunk would be.
That's almost, I mean, kind of their thing too, where they tend to describe their books like not just on the Realm and Sand side, but on the Collective Inkwell too. I think where it's what would it like the Z2135 series was what Hunger Games meets The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Is how they described it.
I can think of another one. This is it's like paranormal romance slash chick lit. It's the Undead series by Mary Janice Davidson.
Yep.
And yeah, it's the book I read was Undead and Unwed, and it has like one of the greatest pitches I've ever heard. It's a ditzy fashionista dies and becomes the queen of the vampires, which was pretty cool. Yeah, it was an interesting book. Like it's got like all the stuff you would like with the paranormal romance, but it's also got chick lit elements too. Have you read it, Amy?
Yeah. I haven't read the entire series, but I've read a
I
couple.
haven't either. There's a lot of books in the series, but the
Well,
first
you
one was pretty funny.
Nora Roberts. You think about hers,
Yeah.
and a lot of those have fantasy elements, but they're chick lit, women's fiction, romance, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess we call Mark Twain. Let me see if I can get the title right, but like a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court.
Yeah. That would be a good
Sci-fi,
mashup.
time travel, historical fiction.
The point I was going to throw on the table is that today's subgenres were somebody's mashup at some point, right?
That's
Almost
a good point.
every single case. So we've got a lot of things that people just take for granted now that are, were some strange juxtaposition of two completely different things. Like even to the point of like, I know the one that came to mind actually from and I don't know where exactly it started, but in Sean Coyne's story grid that I was talking about, which actually he is just launching as a book like this week, I think. So you can finally read it if you want to, Michael. Is that thrillers, thriller is a fairly recent genre category that's been huge for a while now, but was really mashing together mystery or regular crime type stories plus some horrific elements to become that idea of a thriller. It's now, it's been as one of the different things at movie, at a video store for decades now, but it's that at some point that was a mashup.
Well, if you want to go even deeper than that, like on a really, really subtle note, think of like Lee Child, where he talks about taking like the classic Western character and putting him in a modern setting. Because, I mean, the Jack Reacher books in a way are Westerns. It's a stranger comes to a strange land and wreaks havoc and beats the bad guys and rides off into the sunset, right?
Yeah, he's definitely one of those old Western type characters where, he never does any wrong.
Yeah.
He could use a little bit of bad in him.
But yeah, I think maybe if you go that way too in terms of like characters, taking a traditional character and putting them in a setting that's kind of unexpected.
Well,
they're
doing a lot of that on TV these days too. Like if you look at what the heck is it called? But the Sherlock Holmes show that's on right now.
Yeah.
Set in modern day, but he's basically the same character. He's an addict and a genius, elementary. That's it. they've done Grimm. They've taken all of those
Once Upon a
characters
Time.
yeah, is that one still on?
Yeah.
So
Fairy Tales.
they're what's the other one with the Ichabod Crane?
Oh, Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow.
Mhm.
They're just mashing left, right, and center, right? It's like I think Grimm was probably I think it was the first that kind of kicked off. There've been shows before, but I think Grimm was the one that a couple years ago really kicked off everybody else jumping on board, and there's just show after show after show right now where they're doing the same kind of thing.
I think it's really common in movies, like Cowboys and Aliens. You guys ever see that?
Oh God, I saw that one on a list. Again when I was looking before the show, that movie was so disappointing. You could just tell in Harrison Ford's dead eyes that he hated every minute of filming that thing. Like he just did not seem to want to be there. And man, that movie was a mess. It had a lot of potential, but they just didn't pull it off.
Yeah, I think movies, they get away with it a lot more, because visually you can merge so many different elements together. Whereas with a book, I think you really have to. I think that's why it's so hard for us to come up with examples.
Well, and they're trying to do. Well, movies are good. Movies and TV. I mean, we come back to these kinds of things, but it's the same reason that when you read a book on the craft of writing, 9 out of 10 examples they use are from movies, because everybody's seen Jaws, but not everyone has read whatever. Name a book. Yeah, sure, good. And they're starting to do romance zombie movies now, right? With I can't remember what it was called, but there's been a couple of those lately, I think. And Amy's rolling her eyes again.
Warm Bodies. I was trying to reach the name. Warm Bodies.
Is that what it was? Okay. Yeah, so it's definitely not uncommon.
I know one. Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
I was going to say that I haven't read them, but I've heard her talk about them in a bunch of different ways, because I like the Writing Excuse podcast, is listening to Mary Robinette Cole talk about her books, where her Valor and Vanity, and like there's a few different books that she has where they're set in sort of Regency or Victorian type period, and she'll have like it's Regency romance plus some really cool magic, and then she's like the second one in the series is Regency romance plus the magic plus it's a heist story. So she really has, and then she's got like another one where it's like more of a crime, police sort of a thing. So it's neat how you can take that sort of way to it as well.
Right, it's a good way to maybe start a story where you say, like, just because you're setting your book in Rome, that doesn't dictate what the story has to be. You can say, I'm going to set it in Rome, but okay, now what kind of story is it now? Is it a romance? Is it science fiction? Nothing's off the table.
And the name for you to write down, Patrick, is Stephen Saylor, because he's the one who writes like mysteries set in and around ancient Rome. So each one of his is like that's exactly what his genre is. Saylor, I think.
Okay, I'll check.
I haven't read them, but I keep seeing them at this one used bookstore my wife and I go to, and I haven't picked one up yet, but I will at some point.
Okay.
Yeah, another series, and you'll know this, Amy, but 100 Days in Deadland by Rachel. Is it Ox or Aucus?
AUKUS.
AUKUS, okay, because someone said AUKUS, and I was like, okay, Rachel Aucus. That's like a really good example of a mashup. I mean, it's a retelling of Dante's Inferno, but with zombies, and it takes place in the modern world. And there's a lot of really... Oh, what was that? I didn't hear you.
It's on my list over here.
I think it's been on my list for a while, too. It's one of those...
It's good stuff. Like the reference... Because I've read the original Dante's Inferno, so it's pretty cool. Like, the references are pretty subtle. So that would definitely be a good one.
Okay. I'm going to see here. Any... feels like things are kind of starting to wind down here. Any other examples that we can think of?
This is one of those where I like when Amy said earlier, we've read more of them than we think. I think it's just one of those that's just hard to, it's not automatic.
That's what I was going to say. One of those categories that's like a big category within Kindle and stuff is like time travel romance. That was a mashup, right? Like I've been reading, I've been watching the show, the Outlander show, So my wife actually read the book as well, and then she's like, she finished the book, so now she's not going to watch the show, so I'm just watching the show by myself. It's,
Have you seen...
That was an earlier one. I don't know if she was the first one to do that, Diana Gabaldon, but there's been tons since she made it big, right? So.
Did you... I think I've mentioned them before, and I don't know if you guys ever ended up watching them, but the first one, thinking of sort of time travel romance, the Safety Not Guaranteed, is a great movie. About a guy who puts an ad in the newspaper. It's got the girl from Parks and Recreation in it. I don't know if you guys watch that show, but anyway, guy puts an ad in the newspaper saying, looking for a partner to travel through time with me. You must provide your own weapon, whatever, safety not guaranteed. So the local newspaper kind of sends a team down there just to, because clearly the guy's nuts. It's one of those little movies, and man, is it good. You should definitely check that out. And the other one with Bill Nighy, where the men in his family have the ability to travel through time. Let me look it up real quick. About Time, I think, or let me look it up here.
It's just funny because pretty much anytime you introduce time travel, if it's not straight sci-fi, it ends up being a mashup, right?
Yeah.
Doctor Who is every kind of mashup. So.
Yeah.
About Time. Yeah, About Time.
About Time.
Yeah, so the men in this family have the, and it took me a little bit to get into it, but it's a pretty good movie as well. Time travel is always such a tricky thing, right?
Yeah, it's like one of those genres that it's kind of scary to write. You really have to know what you're doing when you're writing a time travel.
Or just accept that you're going to completely mess it all up, and you just say, well, it's like putting a maybe that's, put one of those other tricks like putting a unicorn in the story. It's like, what, it's time travel. Of course it's screwed up.
Exactly. It's hard to invest yourself in time travel, too, because there's so much, there's a lot of moving parts, But, yeah, I think you're right, Jamie. I think that time travel in and of itself is a mashup. I mean, anytime you have a character from, Back to the Future, that's a mashup in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you have a character going from one point of time to another, it's like the traditional Western story.
I've heard of the showrunners from Doctor Who saying that's why it's so cool and they've been able to run it for 50 years, because absolutely any type of story, anywhere, any when, is possible.
Yeah.
So that's, as a writer, you have everything to work with.
True.
Oh man, I'm just looking at one of these ones that's got all these examples of some of those funny, all the different crazy genre mashup ones that are coming out with these days.
The ones with something plus zombies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wuthering Heights and a werewolf and a zombie too.
See, those are the ones that just kind of, it's just like, come on, it's just like they're taking a classic and just making it with zombie. Yeah, I don't know.
Are they taking?
How about Gossip Girl Psycho Killer?
It takes a lot of skill to really do something like that, which is why I recommend.
Or it doesn't. I don't know.
Well,
but
no, but I mean to do it well.
Oh, sure.
Well,
and I'm assuming that
is good.
I'm assuming that all of the stories that they're mashing in that way, based on the fact that there's so many of them, I'm kind of assuming that all of the base stories that they're taking are not under copyright anymore, and that's how they can get away with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. But
although I don't know who did Gossip Girl Psycho Killer, because that's certainly not out of copyright. But I wouldn't mind them taking the Psycho Killer to most of the cast of that show. my sister used to watch it when she was living here.
I guess if they want to
Saved by the Bell with zombies. Yeah, just start bringing back all the
Full House and zombies.
Classics. Yeah, Full House of zombies.
bring back all the characters as zombies.
Actually, I think we just gave that. Looks like we just gave Amy an idea. You're going to write Full House and zombies now, aren't you?
That would be a really cool book, though. You have characters that are based on the Full House. I mean, obviously you can't do it for copyright, but that would be that. I don't know. Ideas are kind of churning around in my head now.
There you go.
Michael?
Yeah, write a sitcom. A sitcom is a book.
There you go. Okay. So any final thoughts before we wrap this up? On genre mashups, we're all good. So Amy, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have
It was
you.
a lot of fun.
So before we wrap things up, do you want to tell our listeners and watchers a little bit about yourself as far as sort of what you're writing and where's the best place to connect with you online? Can you hear me, Amy?
Hey, Amy.
Can you hear me? Yeah, you're something with your sound. I think it's your sound. Is you sound like a
You're
sign.
mashed up and you sound like a robot.
Yeah. Well, I think you said
It
awesome.
actually does sound awesome. It's kind of beautiful. It's not like.
Go ahead. Oh, we can't. Yeah, sorry, we can't understand a word you're saying. I'm so sorry.
If you want to put it in the chat window, we can translate for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to drop your web address into the window there, and we'll maybe mute your mic while you're at it.
Yeah.
I don't know what she's pointing at.
Oh, it's in her lower third.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
okay. Can you mute your microphone?
I'll pull up her website.
There we go. Okay, so that was weird. I don't know what the heck happened with the sound there, but something went terribly, terribly wrong with Amy's mic there.
Try unmuting and saying something again, just to see if it cleared itself out. No.
Nope.
Sorry.
And so because she can't talk now, there we go. So you can go to www.feycreations, so F-E-Y creations.com.
Yeah, and I'll just read her short bio, since she can't speak for herself here. It's on our website, but A.R. Miller's contemporary fantasy series, Fey Creations, has been compared to potato chips. Absolutely no nutritional value, but fun to read and highly addictive. The series revolves around her stylist Keely Fey, the secrets of her heritage and suppressed magical talents. And Amy lives in central Iowa with her accommodating husband and their feline companion. And yeah, when not testing the patience of readers with cliffhanger endings, you might find her wielding a makeup brush or curling iron as a freelance stylist. So that's directly from her website.
Okay. So
looks like she's got 3 books there in the series so far. Is that right? And the next one coming out later this year. Awesome. Cool. And let's see. Let's give people books to start with. So Disenchanted is book 1.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, well, thanks again for joining us. I'm sorry, sorry for whatever technical oddity we're having going on there. So to our listeners, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at tbrpodcast@gmail.com, and be sure to visit our Goodreads page. And we will talk to you next week. Everybody have a good one.
Happy reading, everyone.